Hi, I'm Jermaine Core, here for another episode of Rutgers Retrospective. I'm here at Old Queens, the oldest section at Rutgers University, now receiving its newest generation. As we welcome in the 250th anniversary class of 2016, we reminisce about Rutgers history. We can't take you back 250 years, but through film we can take you back to the 1960s. Rutgers from the Inside describes what student life was like at a time when the doors of higher education opened itself to a more diverse population. Let's listen as the class and faculty of the 1960s express their opinions.
There's no point in even conserving knowledge unless it gets out to a new group of people. So I would say the business of a university is to enable the next generation to take up where the present generation leaves off. In other words, keeping society moving.
Every day you learn something completely new. Your life changes from month to month. 1 month you have one opinion, the next month you have a different opinion.
The way things are changing, how do you know you won't be obsolete before you even get out?
By the time I get out of college, be obsolete? I just don't think I will be. Sure, the ideas that I'm learning now may become obsolete, but
when you're talking about an exciting place to be, when you're talking about the inside of the university, not the outside.
Now, the best way to have insight and understanding of ideas is, of course, to rediscover them yourself. In fact, suppose you consider yourself in the following situation. You're placed in a bare room with bread and water, a pencil and paper. How do you go about conveying on this sheet of paper a correct, precise impression of this curve to the person in the next room? And you are to slip this piece of paper to him on the other side of the door, and he is to recreate this figure. Yes?
try to describe the slope of the line as it moves along.
Yes, slope, but I could only say, well, it sort of starts down in the lower left and rises and then declines and rises, declines. It's not really such an easy thing to do, using the ordinary language of conversation. How would you say? Yes?
One could superimpose a grid system whereby you could plot the individual points of the line.
A grid system. What is the language you're really using? Yes?
Numbers.
Numbers. That's the point. Instead of this curve being looked upon as being a collection of points, look at what is a collection of pairs of numbers. Well, now that you've put yourself in a position similar to that of Descartes, you can appreciate the magnitude of this imagination.
Over the head, Freddy. You go under. Get under. You're under. Get under, Fred. Fred, over.
Do you think students at Rutgers feel overwhelmed by its size?
This is one of the great problems of American education today. We don't want one huge and overpowering university in which any entering student, for that matter, any student would feel hopelessly lost. We expect for the student to have his cake and eat it too by being part of a major university, and yet be a member of a small unit in which people will pay attention to him as an individual.
I think you have to be really an extrovert. I know people that have to get out and have to meet people, that have to feel that they're wanted. You really feel that? Do you feel
Do I
feel
it?
Yeah.
No, I don't feel it.
No, I don't feel it either.
But my roommate feels
I
it.
know my roommate feels it.
Yeah.
Believe me.
I've experienced arriving and feeling the place was too vast, and then suddenly finding out that this is only this is the test, and then you can go on to meet people and to
discuss things with your professors and to stop in on them at night. They do keep office hours. You still can meet enough that you're matching pound for pound the kind of education you get in a small college or got 100 years ago.
I don't say you're matching it. I say it's different. I don't say it's inferior. I say it's just different.
Dr. Bruce, I understand that in order to be accepted as a student freshman, one has to represent the upper 10% of the class during their high school years. Is that correct?
It's not policy. We would like to take many more. In my opinion, it's not the proper job for a state university to have to be as exclusive as we are at the present moment. We should be taking many more people who are perfectly well qualified to get a college education. And we have been able to more than double our size, but the population, the high school population, is still way ahead of us.
Can you possibly take more of them in the future?
Now, that's a budgetary matter. If you're really concerned with getting the students to learn, getting them to take the initiative and learn, this is going to be a more expensive operation. The student who's learning is always going to be more of a drain on the faculty time because he's pestering people all the time. He wants help. And outside of your regular classroom work, you have a great deal more time to spend with the students. This is more expensive, it's more exhausting, and it's much more fun. I mean, it's the only real business there is in this education at all. So it's the learning, and I think if you get around to emphasize that, then you begin to realize that you are dealing with individuals.
It's difficult for us to understand what they actually thought of Jackson. We can think of him in our own framework, in our own value system, but in their value system, it's hard for us to put ourselves in.
But I wonder whether we can somehow define the relationship with Jackson, with President Johnson, with President Kennedy.
For some reason, Kennedy was a combination of everything that we admired. His ambitions, his hopes, his attitudes towards life, just about everything that he held.
Lois? I think one thing is that he sort of gave the impression that now we're going to get moving. That it was an office of everybody, even though he was the one who took the oath and he was the one getting paid for it. But we were all there with him.
But the significant point is that you should read it in this way.
If a group of youth can feel this way about Kennedy today, then you can sort of understand how the people who wanted to get ahead then could feel this way towards Jackson, how he could have this tremendous popularity.
Dr. Fossil, how does a university experience affect a student?
The best thing that a college or university can do for a student is to make him very conscious that there are other minds and other traditions than his own, to make him tolerant of them if possible, but at least to make him understand them and be able to analyze them.
Well, I started out in a pre-medical program, and I decided that, well, I realized that I liked literature very much and changed into English, and now I'm planning to do graduate studies in political science.
So, you changed from pre-med to literature?
Yes.
What was the thing that set you to do that?
Well, I became fascinated with literature. I was doing well in science courses, but I just became very fascinated with something, and suddenly realized that this is where I should be going, and not something else that might look more lucrative, but just doesn't provide the stimulation or the enjoyment.
But now from literature to political science?
To political science, yes.
How come that?
Well, it has to do with a trip that I made through a connection on campus with the university chaplain. I participated in a program whereby I spent a summer in Africa working with other American students and African students, and became very much interested in political developments as they deal with people individually. We sit back and talk about politics academically, but I saw where politics meant to many people a song or a parade or a certain piece of cloth or an enthusiasm, a way of life.
It's almost as if you were walking down the street and you started seeing new things that you didn't see before.
Professor Waxman, what are you trying to get across to the students?
I taught the students not to believe what I said, to question me. You know, you can take certain facts are facts, but the interpretation can be different.
How about the problems of language? Do you understand one another?
Yes, not always. I don't know whether I'm understood, but but I do understand.
The most important thing is the association that you have with all the people you meet, and not only the professors, who certainly have a profound influence on your thinking, but the students that you look up to, the students that you don't look up to. The greatest value, I think, in college education is this tremendous variety of people.
What about the scholar?
I think a scholar at least to me, is someone who learns to learn. I think the important thing about college, one of the things is that it teaches you to learn on yourself. You're on your own.
Why is it important that an undergraduate be able to do this without supervision?
Well, its learning process would be he'd do it himself instead of having the professor standing around like a mother hen, making sure he did everything okay.
I will tell you an experience I had with a bright youngster. He would come always rather late. I have a tendency to come very early to the laboratory, usually around 7:30 or 8. He would come about 9, but he worked late. I mean, there was no question. He was no idler. But that was his custom, which I respected. But one day I came to the laboratory and I found the doors open. And I thought the janitor was probably cleaning. And then I saw the door to the incubator. We had a special incubator room. I saw that open. And I wondered who was there. And I came in, and here was this boy holding up some plates, and his eyes were popping out. Because there was the experiment, and he was so anxious to know what's going on that he came the next morning ahead of me. And I knew that he was on the way.
What would you say makes a good teacher?
I think a passionate interest in the subject, so passionate that he can't stand for other people not to know about it.
How does the scientist get his motivation, Professor Lerman?
The creative scientist is creative because the material he works with resonates in some way with deep personal needs, so that he gets a kind of personal satisfaction out of working with that kind of material in that way that he might not get with working with other kinds of material. I'm interested in birds since I was 14 years old. And the first time I came in contact with birds as living creatures in a natural environment in a city park in New York, I was very much aware of us, being strongly, personally moved by the contact. And so there was a strong feeling that these creatures had a life which was mysterious and beautiful.
The bird on the right is the male, and that movement that he's doing is called the bowing coo, and it's this courtship movement that the male addresses to any bird that comes into his territory. The preening movement that the female is making is something that an adult, sexually receptive female does, which inhibits the male from attacking her. He would attack any bird that came into his territory that didn't do that preening in response to his bowing coo. But she'll lay eggs after 8 or 9 days of associating with the male, even though she and the male are separated by a glass plate. And by altering the behavior of the male by physiological treatment, we're able to show that it's his behavior which stimulates her endocrine system to produce the hormones which make her want to sit on the eggs. I always welcome undergraduate students who want to work in the laboratory. And the graduate students are people who really have a passion for this kind of work. Also, they provide continuity. They provide a feeling that the work that one does is not like a pebble dropped into a pool, which makes a ripple which dies away of its own initiative and its own momentum. But they provide a possibility that some of the work that one has done will lead to more work that's independently motivated and doesn't depend upon one's own immortal presence in the world for one's activities during life to have had some effect.
It's a release of energy, a release of feeling. They are probably the freest moments that I've ever spent.
I studied sociology at Douglas as an undergraduate, and I began painting on my own after I graduated, and just this year entered the master's program. Well, I started painting and just began to love it, and wasn't that involved in sociology, I think. I'm very interested in color now. I was doing sort of dark landscapes last year, and this year I began working with the figure and with the portrait. Well, it's just, I guess it's the way a painter grows mainly. You know, you start kind of muddy sometimes, and you just
Why, do you know?
begin to work with pure color.
Any idea as it relates to how you feel?
Well, I feel that this is the way I want to work. It satisfies me more, I guess. It's more what I want to do, I think.
This is, I think, one of the great things that attracted me to the Rutgers Art Department is the spirit that there is there, and you can practically breathe it when you go into the building. Of here's a chance to do what you want to do, provided you do it. And at first it seems like very casual, everyone is sort of running around, but there's an underlying seriousness behind the work of everyone. And it makes for a tremendous atmosphere, and we're encouraged to do this, and I think a lot of the professors that guide us along this tend to always prod us and say, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?
There is more life and vitality in the arts than there has ever been. I think probably the fact that the artists, the practicing artists, now appear as part of the faculty, which is new, which had never been allowed 30 or 40 years ago, has contributed a great deal to this. The same thing is true with music. Not only have the concert programs with the artists from outside of all types increased, but the students themselves are forming their own musical organizations. And this is good. They're alive not only in the arts, but in the humanities.
The Rutgers Library certainly shows the effects.
Where he gives you a list of books, an enormous list of books, which you couldn't read possibly all of them. But it's up to you, and you're expected to go out and to read as many books as you can and try to find this material.
You can't help but going on to another chapter, reading more and reading more and reading more. It is habit forming. It's worse than cigarettes.
Now, this is the type of the teacher that you have to, out of necessity, go to the library to perform well for.
In the 19th century, the teaching was done almost entirely with textbooks. One textbook per course, and the student learned the textbook and passed the course. Nowadays, the curriculum is much wider. They have to go to the libraries. For example, in the middle of the 19th century, the Rutgers Library was open on Saturday mornings from 11 to 12 a.m. Now it's open from 8 a.m. until midnight, 6 days a week, and from 1:30 to midnight on Sundays. And Sunday night's one of the busiest nights of the week.
I just don't lark around the library and looking for books. Education to me is a real business. It's a real fight for knowing what you have to know on the time you have to know it, and I don't have time to run around the library.
Except for papers.
Except for papers.
You're not told exactly what to do, how to do it, when to do it. You're only told when it's due.
As far as young scholars on campus, I find an awful lot of them. Here we have what's called the Henry Rutgers program. This is designed for special students. It gives them a chance to do some individual work on their own, some research projects.
Mr. Woods, in general, I like this outline. I do think, though, for purposes of the paper, we're going to have to sharpen it up and develop the first part. For instance,
department stores used elevator operators that were college graduates even in this country during the
But then
Depression.
why educate them?
Well, why not? I mean, won't they be better off themselves? Won't they be able to enjoy life better? After all, don't they exist?
Well, certainly a college-educated man employed as an elevator operator is better than an unemployed college-educated
But
man.
why not?
Well, the point is that all the money spent on educating him would be resources that
Yes,
are
but you see, that's
wasted.
exactly what you don't make clear here. This is a question of misallocation of resources. Isn't this what you're talking about?
Yes.
Qualify. What in the world do you mean? Please explain to me your position. Define your terms, please. I get very upset about sloppy terminology and sloppy references.
Does that make you very popular?
Amongst lots of teenagers.
The real satisfaction of higher education is the satisfaction you get from taxing your own mind. An athlete will know what I'm talking about.
Well, it's quite a marvelous to describe when you're sitting there and the boat is really going, zipping along, and you're sitting on top of the water, up out of the water.
As far as I'm concerned, the thing that college is going to do for me is that it's going to give me a broader awareness of the world I live in, how I am constructed, and how I relate with other people.
I gather Rutgers agrees.
Educational institutions exist to make you more effective citizens.
Has Rutgers historically played this part, Professor McCormick?
In the class of 1775, for example, there was James Skierman, who after a brief military career became a member of the Continental Congress in 1836. Among the 21 graduates, there was a future Secretary of State, a future Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, a future Governor of New Jersey, a future President of the American Bar Association, a future Congressman from Michigan, a future distinguished mathematician who taught at several universities. What explains this remarkable group of men, I don't know. I suspect that to some extent they educated one another, they stimulated one another.
See, we never had the Ivory Tower College. We came close to it because along about the 1840s and 50s, they just withdrew from the mainstream and stewed in their own juice. It required the Land-Grant College to steam it up again.
Would you say Rutgers' history was unique?
We are the only college founded as a colonial college, which is also a land-grant college and then a state university.
How have you reacted to becoming a state university?
Now, there is more excitement about being on this faculty, a member of this faculty, and seeing this place grow than there's ever been. There's an opportunity to introduce new things. I mean, new courses, new programs, experiments, and whatnot, and this is good. And then, of course, we've got all kinds of advantages. One of the greatest of which right now is the proximity to New York. And proximity without presence.
Attention is vibrant, and things that began this area first.
We've got a tremendous concentration of research divisions of industry. They move in practically one a month. And these divisions are coming in because of the presence of universities. And the tremendous interest in research at Princeton, the tremendous growing interest in research here at Rutgers.
In other words, the community is now coming to the college, whereas throughout the 18th and much of the 19th century, the college had constantly tried to persuade the community that it had something to offer. There's been a revolutionary change of attitudes toward higher education in America. It's now very much in. Society is making demands on the colleges, asking the colleges to do this and to do that in terms of teaching, in terms of research, in terms of producing members of professions. More recently, such things as needs for a law school, needs for a medical school, needs for a library school, needs for a school of social work.
Are there special problems Rutgers is being asked to handle because of the kind of place it is?
There are certain types of problems which can really be handled only by universities, because nowhere else is there a team of researchers available to you. Take, for example, this new institute that we've set up, the Water Resources Institute. And this would pay off, for example, in our studies in connection with the Delaware Valley, where everybody from all the different departments you can possibly think of would be involved in studies of what happens to the control of water in that particular valley.
After all, it was thought that water problems were something that the West had to worry about for their sins, and that the East was more blessed and did not have to take care of this.
Now we had to be concerned because we get 48 inches of rainfall a year. Now with man has changed the landscape where the rainfall is back in the ocean within 2 hours today, it becomes necessary to make up for the loss. California brings water from 700 miles.
See, if the price really went up, maybe we could catch it in rain barrels cheaper. We have to say, for $1 million, you can get water that you can drink. For $500,000, you can get water that you can just fish and swim in. And for $100,000, you can just, what's the lowest order biologically?
Where you have engineers, you have chemists, you have your botanists, everybody involved, sociologists, economists, ecologists, all working on a common problem.
This is the size of it, the diversity, the number of people involved, and the university's got a responsibility here.
An awful lot of oysters planted, and when they all died, it made everybody feel kind of bad. There's a lot of men we call bushlers, but when the bays close, it knocks out their living.
As more and more water is diverted from the Delaware for one purpose or another, the critical salt content is allowed to move up on the seabeds, and with it moves the oyster drill. The oyster drill is able to drill a beautifully beveled hole, the shell, then rasp away the meat of the oyster. As a research agency of the state university, you train your men by producing the basic information that the oyster industry of Delaware Bay requires. As we get more and more people moving into our coastal areas, the impact on the natural resources is tremendous.
We are continuing to take land to build houses and industries on it without asking the question as whether or not this is in the best interest of the state of New Jersey. We're talking about, for example, putting 40 lanes of additional traffic through the state of New Jersey, and we haven't asked the question as what is the effect of air pollution from the automobiles on New Jersey. We must look to these problems, which are extremely complex. There's something new in the way of research problems today, and because they are not susceptible to a single approach.
And I think that we are making an important contribution in getting some of this information out into the community.
This is why it's a great university, in my judgment. You know, I didn't realize there were so damn many so much noise in this environment, you know. That's another question of environmental science. Oh, yes, it's killing us. Killing us. I can't hear a thing. Terrible. Absolutely terrible.
So in actuality, the Rutgers campus includes the entire state of New Jersey.
The project which the Urban Study Center has got underway and in Newark is to find out where these kids go, why do they give up hope.
Tell me something about the neighborhood in which you live. Your feelings about it.
My oldest brother, he got into serious trouble.
What do you think the reason for this?
I think that the reason for this is because there was nothing for him really to do where we are living. There are no kind of activities sports-wise or educational. There are possibilities, but I guess he was never much interested in this.
Mm-hmm. But you live within the same neighborhood. How long have you lived in this neighborhood?
It's 10 years now.
It's fairly natural, I think, that the federal government or the state governments involved would turn to the Urban Studies Center to work on the problems of our increasingly urbanized society.
This has become an urban country. 8 out of every 10 kids on the farm, for example, is moving to the city. And this state, New Jersey, is the most urban state. And all the things that we see growing around us in the city, these are the concern of a state university. It's different from a private university. It has a responsibility, and we're simply continuing a tradition that we began a long time ago with agriculture. You talk to the College of Ag, they know this by heart.
What's the university contribution? What resources does it have that might be useful here?
Well, I think that's one of the most interesting things that's developed in the university in recent years is that a variety of disciplines have discovered that not one of them by itself can answer all of the questions.
What Mayor Holland asked when he assembled in his office representatives from a variety of public and private agencies, including us, was, look, we have a people problem in Trenton.
Done a good deal of research on this question of involving the
people who need the help.
Yes, in fact, I think in this case, we may have come up with something which urban studies could pass on to others.
In other words, you're relying on Rutgers to extend the community experience.
You realize you need a better point of view. Now, where are you going to get one?
Well, I remember you called me on the phone one day and said you heard something about this urban issue seminar and could you sit in to see whether it had anything for you?
That was like going back to college. For each week, one of these fellows would hit a facet on the urban problem, maybe the lack of planning or the changing family pattern, and I'd go back thinking, we're opening this door, and it's like unraveling a sleeve that you just can't stop.
I suppose that's one of the university's major functions.
And the further point is that if we go into this research, every bit of it pays off doubly in the instructional programs. It's all tied into your teaching, so it's an ideal combination.
I found that every time I did a large research project, that I got so interested in it that I wanted to let the students in on it too. So I would come back into the classroom and connect it with what I was doing, and try to excite them in it the way I'd been excited, or at least try to transfer my excitement with my project to the subject that I was teaching them.
Yes. However, I find myself wondering, how does this feeling of getting involved affect the graduate student?
You are under pressure, really, and you have to perform. This is your chance to either do or die. Also here, you learn to work out your sources, and you learn, so to speak, the tools of your trade.
This is drilled into you in a way you're not likely to forget. Take Karanis, for example.
Read, Mr. Bateman, read.
The Russes were approaching Tsargrad, and the emperor turned back.
Tsargrad, understand? Tsargrad, the city of the Tsars. The city of the emperors. Tsargrad is Constantinople, is it not? And anyone who attacked Constantinople, in a sense, became famous. Let us say, you look into Ostrogorski. Who's Ostrogorski?
Famed author on the Byzantine Empire.
No. What does he teach now? You don't know? You don't know what Ostrogorski teaches?
Probably in Germany.
No. No, what's the matter with you? He's a great scholar. Belgrade, you see? Well, all right, now, when did the Russians first appear in history?
Approximately 860 A.D.
Why you say approximately? It's exactly 860. Well, let's be accurate, eh? We know now the exact date. You know how? Examine the chronological elements given by the Russian Chronicle. Will you find any discrepancies?
It says 863.
These all seem to point to the fact that it's 860.
You see? You have two chronological elements there which don't jive.
I don't know which one is acceptable.
When you examine these, what do you find?
They all agree.
They all agree. So, in this little chronicle, everything jibes. Everything jibes.
Most of the students we get as graduate students, indeed, are, I think, students who've been very profoundly affected by their undergraduate teachers. Once a student has been bitten, it's very hard to keep him quiet.
What's the ultimate goal that you have in mind for the student at Rutgers?
What they will have is the satisfaction of having driven their own minds just as far as those minds can be driven. That ultimately, it seems to me, is something which is its own reward when you know, facing only yourself and telling no lies to yourself, when you know that you have taxed your mind to the fullest and gotten as much as you possibly can give out of it.
As many things have changed since the 1960s, it's interesting to see the many similarities we share with past generations. It is a testament to Rutgers as we continue to grow as a community and as a global force in education. For RUTV's Rutgers Retrospective, I'm Jermaine Kaur.